Wide awake for the workout?
Yeah.
My brain still hurts.
Don't tighten up too much when you're sitting down. Alright, so I'm not going to talk very long because I don't like talking in front of people, but Adam loves talking in front of people, so he's going to get up here and he's going to come up and talk about shoulder injuries and the CrossFit athlete. So, Adam?
Thank you very much. Thanks for taking some of your Saturday out to listen to me talk. My name is Adam Dalton, and I'm going to be talking about shoulder injuries and then specifically related to CrossFit. So I'll start with a little introduction of myself. I'm using this, I don't have a laser pointer, so I'm going to use this to point. So it's hard to see on here, but my wife and I have a running joke on how you can identify a physical therapist. So it's one of the few professions where you see everyone with a nice pair of pants on and then sneakers to go with that. There's only a few professions where that's allowed and actually promoted. So I'm a physical therapist. My background, I got my education at University of Buffalo, go Bulls. Got my doctorate of physical therapy degree from UB. When I graduated, I got a job at the University of Rochester. My first year out of school, I did a residency program to specialize in sports-related injuries. And I still work at the same clinic. And now I'm the director of the sports residency program at the U of R Sports Designer Pathway. Okay. So, how did I get here? If you can see on this picture here, it's kind of hard to tell, but so Brian posted the older picture of me lifting weights when this gym was in its infancy. So I put an older picture of us drinking a couple beers together. And
I don't drink beer.
If Chris is still around these days, but he was involved with the gym at that point. So if you want to see that picture later, you can check it out.
Fun fact, Adam was actually our very first paying customer.
Woo!
Like $5. We had a picture of ourselves like he started this, not me.
Wait, memberships used to cost $5?
So Brian and I have been friends for a while, and he talked to me and asked me to do a presentation for the gym. And so in my practice, I see a lot of shoulder, knee, ankle injuries. And so the shoulder is one of my specialties, and so I figured I would do a talk on that today. The other thing, CrossFit continues to grow and it's becoming very popular. More and more it's becoming in the public spotlight, and as with other sports, injuries happen. So it's good to kind of discuss that and know what could happen. And Brian's a pretty forward-thinking guy, and I think he's looking out for the health of his members and wants to help prevent injury. And so hopefully I can help with that. So before I go too much further, I should just say that I'm not getting paid to do this talk, so I'm not getting profit, and I don't get any profit for more referrals to our clinic. So I'm just here mostly educational. I'm not trying to sell you guys anything. But now for a little bit of fun. I have a question for the audience. And there's a prize if you can answer this. And even if you're wrong, you still get a prize. So, name one muscle that is involved with shoulder movement.
I don't know if this is a muscle, but subscapularis.
Yeah, nice. Whoa. Set the bar high with that. Anyone else? Yeah.
They're taking all the easy ones.
What's that? What'd you say? Yes. There's a bag coming with that one.
Aw. Nice.
And there's plenty more for everyone at the end. So. All right. Good. So we'll start with kind of what's out there in the literature for. So I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about CrossFit and some of the research that's just starting to come out. But CrossFit, as you guys know, is kind of what you do. It's characterized by workouts that use a wide variety of exercises, including running and rowing to Olympic lifting, powerlifting, and gymnastic type movements. Exercises are often combined into high intensity workouts, performed in rapid, successive repetitions with limited or no recovery time. Up till now, there's been anecdotal reports of fitness gains, meaning people say that they're in better shape, and you just have to take their word for it because that's all there was to prove it. Which is, with some personal experience with this type of exercise, I can definitely support that. But there's finally starting to be some research studies to kind of prove that there is improvements with measurable fitness and body composition. So one of the ways to measure fitness is called VO2 max, which some of you might be familiar with. I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit more because one of the research articles that I'm going to cite uses this as a measure. VO2 max is a way of measuring the maximal amount of oxygen that your body can take in and use during exercise. Typically it's measured on a treadmill or a bike, and the picture here is just an example. So usually you're hooked up to a mast, this person's on a bike, and there's a tube that goes into a computer, and it measures the amount of oxygen that you're using, and then there's a bunch of complicated calculations that go into it, but it gives you a measure of the VO2 max. So typically it's measured with aerobic exercise, either a bike or running on a treadmill. But what they're finding with some of the research is that CrossFit participants are showing improvements with their VO2 max, which kind of goes against the traditional education and the fact that strength training really shouldn't affect your cardiovascular conditioning. But they're showing just with the way that the CrossFit exercises are laid out that people are showing gains with their VO2 max. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the U.S. Army is actually getting involved with this too. They conducted a study using CrossFit in training U.S. soldiers, and they also showed significant improvements in physical fitness of the soldiers involved in the study. So this is, as I was doing a little bit of research for this talk, there's really not a lot of research studies regarding or specific to CrossFit and injury rates, but one of the ones I discovered and didn't even really realize that was out of the University of Rochester was injury rates and patterns across CrossFit athletes. And a couple of the guys in this study I work with these guys in our group. So I didn't put that out there as an advertisement. It just so happens that when I was looking for more information, they had just put the study out recently, so it worked out okay. So what they looked at is they wanted to get a sense of what types of injuries are happening amongst CrossFit athletes and what types of injuries are happening and how frequently they're happening. It was basically just an electronic survey that they sent to CrossFit gyms in the Rochester area, New York City, and Philadelphia, and then they also posted the survey on the national website. And got all the information. So basically the criteria was you had to be 18 and train at a CrossFit gym in the US. So some of the results from that. I think these are actually pretty good. So from some of my experience, I think CrossFit gets a bad rap. People think that people injure themselves a lot when they participate. One of the findings from this study is that the injury rate was about 19.4% for people within the last 6 months. And if you look at studies on runners and injury rates with that, it's actually 19.4% to up to almost 80%. So it's the same or maybe even a little bit better. So I just put that picture of the runner ankle on the slide there.
What would they so that means we should run anymore.
I didn't say that.
What defines an injury though? Is that something that they have to see a doctor for, or is it just something that put them
They
on
had some
workout?
criteria for the survey, so it was something that it was either reported as pain that lasted a week or longer, so that they can kind of weed out just muscle soreness. One of the other criteria was if someone could not participate in a full workout, so if they were limited somehow. And then there was a few other criteria with the survey as well. So they designed it in such a way so that they could confidently say that it was an injury and not just like.
I could say I'm injured every day.
Right. All right, so a little bit more of that same study. These are just kind of bullet points from that, which are helpful in kind of know injury prevention and knowing what to do and what not to do. I'll explain that picture in a second, but so there is no significant differences with rate of injury regarding age, length of participation, so if someone is a beginner versus experienced, the length of the training session, so whether it was 30 minutes or an hour and a half, or the maximum amount of weight that somebody was trying to lift. So that had no significant effect on the rate of injury. Lower injury rates occur in gyms that require a training session for beginners. Males are more likely to injure themselves than females. So that was interesting. And so I put a picture of Jackass, the show, up here, and he has an alligator biting him if you can't see it. And so I figured I'd let you guys kind of decide why males injure themselves more than females. And there's a significant correlation between the amount of coaching and the rate of injury. So more coaching equals less injury, and vice versa. So the types of injuries. So this is what we want to see. In order of frequency: shoulders, back, knee. Shoulders are most commonly injured. Second comes back. Third, knee injuries, which is consistent with other reported sports. So gymnastics, and Olympic and powerlifters also report shoulder injuries as most common. Summary of this study: CrossFit is a workout program that can be safe for athletes across all age groups if performed in a safe environment. So if someone's doing silly things on their own and there's no supervision, then they're probably going to hurt themselves. But if you're smart about it, you'll probably be fine. So let's talk a little bit more about the shoulder. I won't go too deep into anatomy and whatnot. Some people spend their whole lives and careers studying specifically the shoulder, so it's kind of outside the scope of our talk today. But my goal is just kind of to demonstrate that there's a lot going on in that area, and that's why it's probably most easier compared to other things. So just to get a general sense of what you're dealing with, probably wondering why there is a golf ball sitting on a tee. That's a common analogy that I like to use when you're looking at the ball and socket joint of the shoulder. So if you did not have any muscles or connective tissues at that joint, the stability would be the same as a golf ball sitting on a tee. You can very easily knock the golf ball off the tee with very little force. And it's no different with your shoulder. So you rely on the muscles and the connective tissues for stability and mobility. And we'll get into that for a little bit more. So the other big part of the shoulder complex is your shoulder blade or your scapula. That's basically the foundation or the base for any sort of upper extremity movements. It would be no different than trying to build a house on stilts compared to building a house on a solid concrete foundation. If you don't have proper function of the scapula, the shoulder will not function properly either. This is a similar relationship that I just talked about, in the fact that the only connection of your scapula to your skeleton is through your clavicle. Other than that, the only thing stabilizing it are your muscles that attach to it. So again, if there was no muscles, it would be very unstable. So you rely a lot on coordinated muscle contractions to create normal movement and function. So one of the ways to describe abnormal scapular function is the term scapular dyskinesis. The reason I put this on here is because this is also kind of a subspecialty in physical therapists and researchers. A lot of people spend their whole lives studying the normal function of the scapula because it's very complex. And even to this day, there's not really a great understanding of what's supposed to happen and why it happens and what to do about it. And this is kind of evidence of that. So this is a definition from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. And the way that they describe scapular dyskinesis is an abnormal static scapular position or dynamic scapular motion characterized by medial border prominence or inferior angle prominence, earlier scapular elevation, or shrugging on arm elevation, or rapid downward rotation during arm lowering. Now, if you don't take anything from that, basically you can look at that and say, what kind of definition uses or like 4 times? That doesn't really define a whole lot. So there's a lot of confusion, I guess you could say, or there's a lot to know about the way that the scapula moves during sports and whatnot. And any kind of scapular dyskinesis can happen from any sort of pain. It doesn't matter why you have pain, but basically the scapula gets out of whack if you have pain for some reason, and then it kind of has a snowball effect where it creates other problems with the way that the shoulder moves. So one of the most commonly common diagnosis for shoulder pain is called shoulder impingement. And we'll talk about it briefly, but even under that diagnosis, there's 9 or more other classifications that you can kind of go with that. So it gets complicated pretty quickly, but the kind of the general point with that is that this is the top of your scapula. This is that ball and socket joint we talked about. And you can see this is one of your rotator cuff tendons that goes under here. And as you're moving your arm, all of these tendons have to operate under this bony arch. And that can rub or get impinged, creating pain and swelling in those tendons. So there can be supraspinatus impingement, which somebody said earlier. The bicep tendon can get impinged under there. And then there's a lot of other things as you kind of get more into that topic. The point is all of those, a component of that is some sort of decreased space here so that there's less room for these tendons to operate. And that happens largely because of abnormal scapular mechanics, which is something that you can have an effect on when you're exercising, and that's where feedback from a coach often helps when we're talking about form. So just a little bit more on the shoulder anatomy. So the rotator cuff is a term most people have heard of at some point. The rotator cuff is composed of a group of 4 small muscles. So 2 of those are said in our question at the beginning. So we've got supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minoris, subscapularis. Those surround that socket. Those are the big players in stabilizing that golf ball sitting on the tee. So these are small muscles, and so those are not like your heavy lifters, like if you're trying to do an overhead press or something like that. Their main job is to keep the balls centered in that socket as the larger muscles around the shoulder are doing the heavy lifting. So they're very important, but they're different than a lot of the other muscles that you think of when you're exercising. And if they are not functioning correctly, so kind of like we talked about the abnormal scapular kinematics, if there's pain, it affects the way the rotator cuff functions, and then that throws off the centering of that ball sitting in the socket, and then that creates more problems. So as far as injury prevention, that was a very kind of broad brushstroke over the shoulder. Like I said, many people spend their whole lives studying those topics. So there's a lot of information regarding those. But the goal today is mostly just a kind of an introduction to say, like, hey, there's a lot that can happen. As far as preventing injury to your shoulder, I'm going to go back to the study that we talked about earlier. There's a significant correlation noted between injury rate and level of coaching or supervision. That's the kind of underlying theme from the research that's available. If you want to prevent injury, supervision will help you do that. The things that don't really affect your injury rates, age, length of participation, length of training session, and the maximum amount of weight lifted. With that last part, if you're really trying to push yourself with your max weight, there's a good chance you're probably going to hear something from your coach saying like, hey, your form's not very good. So there is a relationship there. But if you're trying to max yourself out and you have nobody watching you, or you're trying to max yourself out and you have supervision, that's going to be the difference between hurting yourself and not hurting yourself. So I'll do a quick summary and then we can talk, address any questions. Current evidence, shoulder is the most frequently injured joint in CrossFit athletes, as with other sports as well. Injury rates in CrossFit are comparable to other sports. So, I think that's a subject where there's a big divide. Either there's a lot of support for the sport, or there's people who are against it. I don't find there's a lot of people in the middle. But that's, in my experiences with the patients that I work with, that's the case with a lot of sports. It's no different in football. People think you shouldn't do it because you get injured, or people really love it. So it's really no different than any of the other sports that people play. The shoulder complex is very complex and withstands a high level of stress during CrossFit exercises. And good coaching is priceless. That's what's going to help you stay out of my office. And don't ignore shoulder pain. If you address it early on, it's much easier to take care of than if you push through it too much. I know a couple of you know me from before, so I did the cliche thing and put a picture of my family on there. But that's our daughter, in case anyone of you haven't seen her, Holly. And I actually have another question. This was taken in Peru, New York. Who can tell me a city within 100 miles of Peru, New York?
Rochester,
Jamestown.
No.
New York City.
You can have a bottle. It's about 2 hours north of Albany, near Plattsburgh.
Wait, do you like the Bills?
What's that?
Both of you?
Funny. I was gonna put something regarding the Bills in here and say that you're a big fan, but it didn't make the cut. Questions? Yeah.
Where do PTs in general, I know this is a very broad, stand on the whole CrossFit concept, because like, I have ripping apart the other day. And I was like, in any sport, like you said, whether it be running, on the knees, swimming, in any sport, there should be some sort of repetitive type of activity.
Yes.
Why is CrossFit any different?
So part of the problem is that the data is really just starting to come out as far as like injury rates. I think any beliefs out there right now are just based on like personal experience. So if someone's a practicing physical therapist and they have a couple of patients that were for whatever reason had some injuries from CrossFit, and that's all that they would really know at this point is that so if that person had a weird injury, that practitioner is going to think that happens to everybody who participates with that sport. So it's not like we're taught in PT school that it's a bad thing to do, but I think it's just that it's still
So it's
newer.
unique to the individual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And just to give you guys a quick little look behind what our programming is like, the coaches here have seen my crazy long spreadsheets for how I program, and I break up every day, every movement into horizontal and vertical pushes and pulls and hip hinges and squats and jumping and pulling abdominal movements. Try to make sure each week we're not doing shoulders. So at the end of the week, I program for someone to come 6 days a week, right? 6 days, 5 days. Every day we have a class. So at the end of the week, you're not doing squatting movements and running movements 4 days and shoulder movements. I really spend probably too much time doing this, but I make sure to make it so we're not going to have those repetitive injuries you're talking about. If you just so happen to come in, every other day, it might be some shoulder work 2 of those 3 days, or maybe 3 of those 3 days, but it's kind of programmed for the full week of someone coming to training to get that constantly varied movement pattern. So
That was one of the things that was discussed in the research article that I used for this, is that there's a lot of variability with different CrossFit gyms, because even though it's I guess franchise, I don't know if that's the right term, but each gym is operated individually. So you could go to a CrossFit gym that's maybe the coaching there isn't as great, or you could find a gym where the coaching is excellent. So there's some variability with that, and that does play a big role in injury prevention.
What reasons would the shoulder pop during normal expression of motion?
Why would it pop?
Yeah.
There can be a few reasons for that. So it's hard to say. It's not like it's one thing, but it can be. Well, part of it can be related to what we talked about with the keeping the head of the humerus centered on the glenoid or that ball and socket joint. If that is not happening properly, you can get some clicking and popping because that is sitting out of the center of that joint, and you can stress the connective tissues around there more, and that can create some noise. So that's just one possibility, and that can happen for various reasons. So that's where someone like myself would have to evaluate a few different things to see why that might be happening.
So would the noise be created by the ball actually being repositioned in and out of the socket?
Yep.
So is that fluid or air? I hope it's not air.
The theory is that it's so there's a negative pressure inside your joints. It happens with your knees, hips, spine, shoulder.
Would you say head, shoulders, knees, and toes?
Yeah. One of the theories is that when you kind of separate the two joint surfaces, that there's like suction, and it can create a popping sound.
Okay.
So again, there can be a few reasons why they're popping, but that's one possibility.
This might be a big of a question, but like impingement syndrome,
Yep.
is that something that can usually be fixed with just PT alone?
Yes. The majority of the time, it's something you can fix with conservative treatment or physical therapy. And that is something where it's, form is a big factor. So people who don't have good form with their shoulder blades don't have as much space under that arch that we talked about, and that can rub or irritate the rotator cuff tendons underneath there, and then that's impingement or one type of impingement. So if you work on either the flexibility or the muscular stabilization needed to improve that form, a lot of times that problem goes away.
Is there a classic symptom of impingement syndrome?
It's typically worse with overhead movements. It's when it's first starting, it's worse with activity, and then typically a little bit better with rest. As it gets worse, then it's probably going to hurt all the time. But those are kind of some key points, like overhead movements, movements out to the side away from your body are going to hurt more. And then at first it will be intermittent, so hurt with activity, and then as you continue to push through that, it will probably hurt all the time.
Can you get a difference in your plumbing?
Yep, so one of the factors is just your general anatomy. So if we go, I'm going to go back to that one picture for a second.